The song you're hearing right now is titled The Disappearance of Bobby Dunbar, and it was released in 1927 by an artist named Richard Rabbit Brown. It's actually inspired by a story of a boy who went missing in Louisiana in 1912. On August 23rd, the Dunbar family took a trip to Swayze Lake in Louisiana, but tragedy struck when their 4-year-old son, Bobby Dunbar, suddenly disappeared. In their frantic search for the boy, the Dunbars turned to the police for help. Police's first hypothesis was that Bobby may have been eaten by an alligator, which, honestly, considering it's a freshwater lake in Louisiana, is not that, that's a pretty good hypothesis. But they basically searched the lake for alligators and then searched their stomachs, and they came back with nothing. And from that point, their decision was, well, I think the best thing to do would be to throw some explosives at the lake and just see what turns up. So that's exactly what they did. They threw dynamite into the lake, hoping that, the explosion would maybe dislodge the body if it had gotten, kind of sucked down to the bottom of the lake somehow. It's not really, I don't think that's how dead bodies work, but in any case, once again, it turned up nothing. From that point, there was about 8 months where the Dunbar family was just grieving because their son went missing, and as far as all accounts went, he was just dead and vanished without a trace. Until 8 months later, when in Mississippi, a boy matching Bobby Dunbar's description turned up. He had been found traveling with a handyman by the name of William Cantwell Walters. Walters claimed that the boy was not Bobby Dunbar, but was instead his illegitimate nephew. And despite the fact that there were several residents that actually backed up Walters' claim, the police were like, nah, and so they just took him into custody, even though people in the town were like, oh yeah, I've seen them riding around. So the police took Walters into custody and took the boy with them back to Louisiana. From there, the boy was delivered back to the Dunbars for them to have an opportunity to positively ID the boy or negatively ID the boy, just to see whether or not that was actually their son. And immediately, the media just swarmed the Dunbars. They were not, they did not have a second of peace once, this boy who was presumably their son came home. And so from day one, there were just reporters all over their house. And the weird thing is that they were all reporting very different things. So while some sources were saying that the family initially was like, we don't know whose kid this is. Others were saying that the boy woke up and opened his eyes and looked directly at Leslie Dunbar, the mother, and said, "Mother!" Nonetheless, it kind of became the accepted story that this boy had just come back and that this was the end of an 8-month-long nightmare that the Dunbars had been going through, and that, everyone who had assumed that this story was a tragedy was wrong, and that this was actually, this great story of the reunion. Meanwhile, while the Dunbars were living it up in fame, William Walters was sentenced to life in prison because he was riding around with his nephew. Thankfully, his lawyer managed to get him scheduled for a retrial, and he was retried and released just 2 years after his initial sentencing. Unfortunately, he lived in public shame for the rest of his life until he died from, I've seen sources say that he died from blood poisoning in 1945. So, kind of a sad end for a guy who really, may not have done anything wrong. So for decades, this story was pretty much completely set in stone. Everybody knew what happened. Everybody knew that William Walters had kidnapped Bobby Dunbar from Swayze Lake and had taken him up to Mississippi. And that was the official story for almost 100 years. However, as I am sure many of you have guessed, this story is not over. Almost 100 years later, in this century, in the 2000s, Bobby Dunbar's granddaughter has uncovered information that pretty much proves Bobby Dunbar was not kidnapped by William Walters. See, one really important detail that I've left out of this story so far is a woman named Julia Anderson. Julia Anderson is a woman who claimed to be the mother of the boy that was found with William Walters. And that boy's name was Charles Bruce Anderson. That's really important because if you look into this case, a lot of modern tellings of the story kind of put Julia Anderson and Leslie Dunbar, the two mothers, as kind of two different sides of the same coin. And, they both are looking basically at the other one as being this horrible person who's trying to take their child away from them. But, when you kind of really dig into it, there are definitely similarities, but there's also differences because the kind of relationship that they had with their children before that was very different. But as I think you'll see, Julia Anderson got kind of a bad rap at the time. So Julia Anderson's story is that she left her son, Charles Anderson, with William Walters, who was the brother of the man that she had Charles Anderson with. So seeing the opportunity for publicity with this kind of rivalry here between Julia Anderson and Leslie Dunbar, a newspaper in New Orleans decided that they were going to, be the ones to give Julia a fair shake at proving that this was her son and not Bobby Dunbar. So the way that they decided to do this was they said, hey, look, you're going to get the same opportunity that the Dunbars had when Bobby came back. And so they brought Julia to meet with the boy, that everyone believed was Bobby Dunbar. The initial reports were very similar to when the Dunbars met with this boy, because both parents were initially unable to identify the boy as being their son. And the biggest thing that really hurt Julia Anderson's chances of proving that this wasn't Bobby Dunbar, that this was her son, is the fact that he did not seem at all interested in her when he met her there. He was just very aloof and just kind of uninterested. But what you've really got to consider and understand here is the fact that ever since this boy got here to this town and got in this community and met this family that he's never seen before, everyone was treating him like a hero. He was being showered with gifts and affection and attention 24/7. I personally think that it was probably just an overload for, 4 or 5-year-old child. It really can't be considered that this was just him not being interested in Julia Anderson because Julia Anderson's not his mom. He's a Dunbar boy. But that's what everybody believed. That's exactly how everybody took it. And I'll get more into why I think that is later, but for the time being, we'll just keep moving forward. One of the biggest things that kind of started going on here is that, the boy that everyone believed to be Bobby Dunbar was seen as this community hero. And with there being a community hero, why not make a community villain? And so that's exactly what they did with Julia Anderson. They just really tried to demonize her as much as possible. Let me read you a snippet from an article that was written about her at this time. Her long journey had been in vain. She had not seen her son since February of 1912, and she had forgotten him. Animals don't forget, but this big, coarse countrywoman, several times a mother, she forgot. She cared little for her young. Children were only regrettable incidents in her life. She hopes her son isn't dead, just as she hopes that the cotton crop will be good this year. Of true mother love, she has none. What the heck? So yeah, I don't know why they had to roast this woman so hard, but despite this, she still wanted to fight in court to gain custody of her son because, what they were saying about her wasn't true. She even came to court with a bunch of witnesses who backed up all of her claims about her giving custody to William Walters and about William having been in town with Julia's son since before Bobby Dunbar even went missing. Public opinion was already just totally set in stone. It really didn't change anything that she had witnesses. What people believed was what they were going to believe, and nobody was really willing to change their mind. Just a quick note, if I've referred to the boy as Bobby Dunbar throughout this video, it's because of the fact that that's who he lived most of his life as. From this point on, he's raised as Bobby Dunbar. He was known by his wife and by his kids as Bobby Dunbar, and he never gave any indication to them that he was anybody else. People really don't even know if he knew whether or not he was Bobby Dunbar, because there was only one time that his son ever asked him, "Hey Dad, did you actually get kidnapped when you were young?" And his dad was just like, I know who I am. And that was all he said. So as I mentioned earlier, this case was broadly seen as closed by the general public. But Julia's family held on to the belief that there was not any kidnapping that happened until 8 months after Bobby Dunbar had gone missing. And that kidnapping happened when the police came to William Walters and took Julia's son away from him. Now we flash forward kind of to today. Margaret Dunbar Cutright, who is the granddaughter. Margaret was pretty obsessed with her grandfather's story from a young age, kind of being equipped with modern capabilities. She decided that she was going to really dig into his story and find out what all had happened in his life. And as she started getting into it, she realized that there was actually some pretty weird stuff surrounding her grandfather's kidnapping. First of all, there were a lot of conflicting details coming from the media. Remember when I said that the media just jumped on the Dunbar family as soon as Bobby was returned to them? Well, during that time, there was basically zero consensus about whether or not he recognized his parents, whether or not his parents recognized him. It was basically all just this mess that gradually over time, a prevailing opinion kind of arose to the top. Then, in her later investigations, Margaret actually ended up reaching out to the children and grandchild of Julia Anderson just to hear their side of the story. And they started investigating things together, and they actually found a letter of somebody that was written at the time that expressed a lot of concern about whether or not the Dunbars actually had a good way of verifying that that was their child. I'll read you a part of that letter. The Dunbars claim that if this had been their own child and he had been gone 8 months, do you think his features would be so changed that they would only know him by moles and scars? This is a farce. If the Dunbars do not know their child, who has only been gone 8 months, by his features, why, they do not know him at all. So at this point, having gathered this much evidence, both families really just wanted the whole situation to be over. And so they decided that they were going to do a DNA test to find out conclusively whether or not the man who was, formerly known as Bobby Dunbar was actually Bobby Dunbar or not. So they got a DNA sample from Margaret's father, and they also got a DNA sample from the son of Alonzo Dunbar, who was the brother of the real Bobby Dunbar. Upon comparison of their DNA, it was conclusive that they were not related. So it is guaranteed that the man formerly known as Bobby Dunbar was not Bobby Dunbar. And it's kind of like, could have just told us that, Dad. So let's talk just a little bit about why everything played out the way that it did. Because there was a lot of evidence even at the time that that boy was not Bobby Dunbar. While there are a lot of factors that go into every case, I think pretty much everything can be traced back to a primary cause, and that being the media. You see, at nearly every step of the journey, the media was spreading the story of Bobby Dunbar's return like wildfire. As a matter of fact, Margaret mentions that when she was initially starting her research, she started with a collection of 400 articles regarding the return of Bobby Dunbar. That's insane. That's like, you gotta consider, by today's standards, 400 articles, that's whatever. But at that time, think about how many 400 articles would have been. Think about how few journalists there were then compared to now. That's a lot to slog through for, one person researching all of this. But furthermore, that's a lot of, were there 400 reporters there in person? How much of that is just, well, I heard from a guy who said that, hey, that boy, where am I going with this? Yeah, so that's a lot. That's a lot to dig through. And considering the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of consensus, it was really just a matter of time before, one kind of was preferred, not necessarily because it was the most accurate, but what I think is probably just because it was the most interesting. That's where stories like Bobby immediately recognizing his mother and shouting, "Mother," when he saw her for the first time come from. Because as we know now, that wasn't Bobby. So why would he have seen a strange woman and just been like, "That's my mom"? He wouldn't. So what I think happened is really just that because the more interesting story was to have this very satisfying conclusion of Bobby Dunbar coming back after having been missing for 8 months, that narrative is the one that people accepted. And so when things came along that challenged that narrative, people didn't really want to let go of that kind of feel-good energy that it brought along. Of course, that's speculation. No one can say that that was definitively the case. That's just what seems most likely from my perspective. I'm totally happy for anybody to disagree with me in the comments. I'm just some random guy who decided to look into it. But yeah, that's what seems the most likely to me. Finally, I want to bring up a point that I found while researching that I think is crazy and kind of hilarious, which is that some sources believe that the inciting action for this whole thing was Percy and Leslie Dunbar, the parents of the Dunbars. They believe that they killed Bobby and dumped his body into Swayze Lake, and that this entire situation was just them trying to cover up the fact that they had killed their son. But why would they do that? Why kill Bobby? I mean, was he just a particularly annoying 4-year-old? Furthermore, why would they have to come up with this whole conspiracy to cover things up? Because if you remember, the first thing that everyone thought when he went missing was that boy got eaten by an alligator. And that's a totally rational conclusion. So why would they be like, no, you see, we got a plan. It's an 8-month long plan that involves us, through the legal system, kidnapping another 4-year-old from Mississippi. Because, here's the real issue with that. Then you just end up back where you started. You just got another annoying 4-year-old. It just doesn't make sense to me that their whole plan would be, we're going to kill our son for no reason. We're going to dump his body in the lake. And then, even though no one suspects us, we're going to come up with a conspiracy to make sure no one suspects us. I don't know. Maybe I'm the crazy one. Maybe this is just the perfect crime, but it doesn't really seem like it. In any case, I want to shout out This American Life, historyofyesterday.com, and allthat'sinteresting.com, because they all three had very, very good write-ups of just kind of this whole story. But yeah, if you enjoyed, I'd greatly appreciate it if you left a like and a comment just letting me know what you thought, where you think I could improve, what you think I did well. The next one that I really want to get into, and it may not be the very next one, but it's one that I want to go into that's going to take a little bit more time, and that is the story of Elan, which is a cult mixed with a school. Anyway, if you're interested in hearing about that, please subscribe. Definitely have another video up just within the next few days.